وخمار شوي area Crossroads.
Artenia Shinla, as the Amazons say, and welcome to the latest episode of Walk the Crossroads. Tonight we'll be discussing one of the central races of the mythos of Altair, and that is the Fae. Now, to state, the Fae are not the only race or species or mass species found in the Altair O'Cross saga. They are just one of the central figures as a species, as they are the ones who've given birth to the many different variations of the Fae, such as the different Fae races on Altair, the Fae of Agyra, and the Fae Ra of Land in the Stars. Now, the Fae are the descendants of the immortals, the gods, and mortals. They live for a set amount of time, and they usually die. Now, compared to a human, Fae can live for ridiculous amounts of time. The ones in Agyra live for millennia. They are almost undying in the fact that they seem ageless. The Fae of Altair, however, tend to live a max of maybe 1,000 years. Some races, most of them, actually live for only 300, and some only for 70. It really depends what they've done to themselves. Now, the reason the Fae exist is effectively they are the result of intermixing between the gods and humans when humans were attempted to be brought over to Altair during the time of the four great cities in Altair history. Now, mortals die when exposed to mass amounts of magic, and Altair is effectively a gigantic fount of magic. So humans had to be manipulated using various genetic techniques and were turned into Fae over time, or were bred into Fae over time to act as this lesser race to be controlled and manipulated by the immortals to get what they wanted. Now, the result of which was a magical race, a race that was naturally magical, and basically gave birth to one of the central species of Altair, that being the High Folk, also other species such as the Elysians, and I believe another one known as the Satkai set, which are technically cursed, but they are the result of a bunch of other things. Now, Fae come in a variety of sizes and shapes. Their name alone comes from the Elder Tongue word Fae Ra, which means fated one. So the word Fae in Elder Tongue roughly just means fated. But because they deal with a lot of English speakers, especially in Agyra, Fae is just the shorthand for them. Now, I'm going to talk about the differences between the three main Fae groups found across currently, and we're going to first look at the ones in Altair. Altair, there are multiple Fae races, including the High Folk, which are made up of the Vila, the She, and the Asherites, and then there is also another Fae race, which is I believe they are the Elysians, which are a kind of feline-like race, which are related to the Olympian gods. And then there are the Jadeborn. The Jadeborn are kind of a slight reptilian, almost elemental race, which are related to the ancient Jade Emperor. Now, in both cases, these races and species are all descended from effectively the mixing of various, gods or immortals and other immortals, and the Fae are their descendants effectively. And they have more normal lives, normal in the fact that they live a certain amount of time and they tend to age near the end of their life. In a lot of cases, these races have natural magic. They're able to, like the Elysians, are able to use various rituals to call upon a power known as Logos. The She can naturally just use magic. The Vila lost it because of a horrible accident, but their relatives, the Asherites, are able to use a almost singing-like magic. Now, all of these races are what most would be described as basically, I believe they're called Sown, which means they have a natural magical talent in the new magics of Altair. Now, The Fey races in Altair are going to be the closest to what you would say are natural Fey, and I say this because the other races, like the Fey found on Agyra and the Feyre of Land of the Stars, have some severe differences. The first thing you have to know about Fey is that their passions tend to be much stronger than ours. They feel things stronger, they react more strongly, and in general, they just have a greater sense of feeling and emotion. Their sense of happiness is at least 2 to 3 times greater. Their sense of sorrow is far deeper. And this kind of gets played with a lot of times. They also have a greater sense of clannishness. They're very big on family. It's almost natural. They will defend themselves to the family and to the last man above all else. Fae also have a tendency towards scheming. This is probably because they lived for a while and because they were raised by the gods, who had a tendency to kind of try to upend each other at different points in the history of Altair. Now let's look a little bit at Agyra. Now Agyra, the broken land or the broken place, is called that because the frame, the route from Altair to Agyra, was cracked during the Giants' War in Altair's history. What this did is, because a crack exists, is it split Agyra into multiple different planes of existence, creating such places as the Shadow, where the dead and spirits and other things hide. The Fey Court's a place where the Fey can recede into, and other planes. Now, the fact that magic also fractured also kind of played with the Fey's mind. Magic is a natural aspect of being Fey. What this caused is the eventual existence of what are known as Thiara, or the Divine Ones, and then Lesser Fey, also known as Spiritkin. Thiara are effectively the direct descendants of the gods. They are at least 2 to 3 generations removed, or a very pure bloodline. Fae in general are very big about their bloodline, because when you're descended from a divine being, as they see it, you probably have the right of rule. This goes back to the existence of Lord Fire and Lady Ice. This is known as the right of Ice and Fire, to rule above everybody else. In Agyra, it's led to a class system where you have central powerful Fey creatures, Fey Lords, as they're generally called in the text, or simply dukes and duchesses who claim tracts of land within the various courts to take control. What this did to the Fey mentally is that many of them have become almost, how do I put it, they're near psychotic compared to other things. They still feel feelings, but they have a greater problem with understanding the feelings of mortals. Now, Fae in general don't really understand mortals, but Agyra Fae, because of the fractured magic, have a fractured sense of empathy. It comes and goes. It makes it harder for them to empathize with other people. They have a greater sense of who they are, but for some reason it's harder for them to attach to other people. Now, this is even worse when you have no magic. When the Fae were taken to the Land of the Stars and they found a land of no magic, they effectively, in some cases, were honed even further. Their passions became greater. Their sense of supremacy became greater. Their clannishness has become greater. The Feyre are a species of grandeur, of supremacy, and that seek greatness in heroes and epics, compared to the Fae of Agyra that want to rule in the name of something that was lost. In both cases, the different races of these worlds are the result of the Fae fracturing, either doing something to themselves like what the Feyre did, such as inventing the synthetics, or bringing themselves back from the dead, getting infected by this weird witch species called the Gwagara. In my books, Fae tend to derive into different races, or derive into different species, or they cause the existence of other races, such as in Agyra, where they interbred and created the changelings, or a few other things they did, but I won't reveal that because it's kind of central to the Nyla Clarkson novels. The reason I did this is because a lot of the times when we look at something that is magical, we are, even in new age fantasy such as the Mirror Empire or the Grace of Kings, or what we see in the works of Scott A. Baker with the 3 C's novel, The Judging Eye. They even have a Fae-like race, the non-men, which are incredibly magically powerful. They ruled. This concept of the old race, or of everything that is remotely magical, tends to somehow still harken back to the human experience of mythology. So in the writings of Altair, the Fae have become a central aspect of the mythology of Altair. no matter what, there is some kind of Fae species in all my books. In the Amazon novels, they're a legend because there's no magic in the Amazon. It deals more with the dreams. The Fae are mostly found in the form of totems. Versus this new world I'm working on, I'm playing around with some ideas based upon Steven Universe of gems and a few other things I want to pull from Atlantis and the Lost Empire. That's still being worked out, but it's something I really like as a concept. So Fae, no matter what, appear in some form throughout all of Oak Cross, and this is because they are the remains of what was the original beings of Altair. That being first the Primordials, then the Titans, then the Immortals, and finally the Fae. Now, Fae is just a random slang term for all races that are descended from, the Immortals only. There are some races which are descended from an Immortal and a Titan, or a Titan and a other thing, and they have different names because their specific descendants does play into things. There's another race called the Disir, and they are the descendants of Oberon and Lady Titania, and they have their own place in the world. They also have a different aspect. This goes back to why the Fae call themselves the Fated Ones. They are the ones, because they are descended from the gods, they are most tightly bound by fate. Compared to a human, humans can change our fate. We can do what we want. That's why we die. That's why we live, we die, and we move on. Fae don't have that. Even the Feyre, to some degree, are tied to fate. Fate is the great weaving of reality. They are tied to it, and the only way they can change their fates is by doing great acts. This is an aspect found in a lot of different mythologies, from what we see in the Journey to the West with Monkey going and doing various things, to Viking mythology, to even some aspects of, what was seen in parts of Polynesian, especially with the destined story of King Kamehameha. Great acts change things, and this is why the Fae specifically call themselves the Fated Ones. They are fated to do things. Now, linguistically, the Fae speak many different languages. In Altair, they speak very similar languages to our own. This is the closest thing you can get to. The main languages they tend to speak outside of that tend to be the Elder languages, because if they're the colonists, such as the Feyre and the Fae of Agyra, they brought the old languages with them. So there's Elder Tongue, which is the primary one used often by Central Fae. There's another one which is in development, which is going to have a lot of aspects of some Asian languages, specifically Sino-Tibetan and some Polynesian. I want to build one that's going to have different African aspects, but effectively the Elder languages represent the oldest of the cultures that existed before the Fae spread out. So they do speak their own languages, but it really tends to relate to the groups that they have the greatest experience or the greatest presence. Great City Fae tended to speak Elder Tongue and one or two other languages, whereas those the early ancestors of the Jadeborn tend to speak something completely else entirely. And there was one that was kind of a pseudo-Greek Albanian language sounding thing, but that one kind of died out because the Elysians, the race that would become the Elysians, never actually truly left Altair. They're a completely separate group. They have their own empire. They don't tend to get along with the other Fae races. So, as you can see, the Fae are this race that has split, rended, and changed throughout the history of Altair to become one of the central magical figures. They give magic, they're the source of magic, they're the changers of destiny, and that is their place in the Oak Cross. So, when you walk the Crossroads, remember that the Fae are not to be trifled with, they are not to be challenged, and in general, you meet one, probably not a good idea to really become its friend, because to them, friend just means plaything. So, thank you for listening to my little rant tonight. Thank you for and if you have any comments, put them down in the comments. I'll do some links, especially to my comments on the Fae earlier. You have any ideas, feel free to put them in the comments, and thank you for your time. And as the Amazons say, Fahen Shush.